Today we will be mostly talking about the Anatolian Lakes and how bad situation they are in right now. So they are facing extinction crisis almost. And I will also talk about our recent work on experimental ecology, and we can talk about this at the end. The things that I'm going to present here is an effort of a very large group. We are collaborating with lots of people, so there are some names, but that is not inclusive everyone, so there are some other people also, so please accept my apologies, and I will try to be as generic as possible. So I am Korhan, I'm an aquatic ecologist. My specific interest also covers community ecology. Emrah kindly gave my background about my education. Currently, I am at Mesocosms in Mersin, and I'm a member of Aquatic Ecology Group. And you can see some of them in this nice archaeological background on top, and also one of our paleoecological field trips in the Alpine Mountains. Again, these pictures are not up to date, so there are many more people with us right now. I'm also affiliated to the Earth System Sciences at Ankara campus and also Ecosystem Research Center at Ankara campus. Right now, my research interest is quite wide, and self-criticism may be too wide, but that's life. So I'm working on observational ecology, trying to understand patterns in time and space around us, asking specific questions, but also working on experimental ecology, trying to test hypotheses. I will come to that, how we do these. And in addition to those, I also try to, our institute is Marine Science Institute. I'm an aquatic ecologist, but my background is mostly freshwater ecosystems. So I also try to integrate with our ongoing works in the seas, trying to, work on the catchment sea interactions, to be able to understand the aquatic ecosystems a bit more fully, if possible. So what is observational ecology? So ecology, you might know, is the science of the interactions among organisms and their environments. And this is in the context of time and space. So to be able to understand these patterns, we can make observations. That is partly as if we are naturalists in the 18th or 19th century sense, but a bit more formal science. So we have hypotheses and we go and pick specific locations that we can ask specific questions. For example, that's an example from Denmark in one of our papers with Arid. In this one, there is people, not only a single person, of course, lots of people have been monitoring this lake from 1989 to 2008. So we have data on various aspects of this ecosystem, from its physical structure to its biota. And this is almost bi-weekly monitoring, so there's a very high frequency data. And then we can ask questions because there are some dramatic shifts. You can easily see that this line, which represents a pattern, is going down after some time. And these colorful patterns that represents the phytoplankton community structure has different colors here. And then after around 1994, it has different colors, more gray. And these lines are going up. So there are patterns in time here that we can observe. And they all indicate a big threshold effect around 1994. And if you would like to know the details, this is phytoplankton biomass, this is phytoplankton community, phytoplankton genera, and the richness and evenness. So some diversity measures. But that's not relevant. That's how we can use observational research for ecology. And what we know here, something has happened. The fish, which is an invasive fish, by the way, in this lake. So it's not belong to the natural community in this lake, but it was introduced by humans. And the scientists decided to take it out from this lake by some methods. And you immediately see the results in the phytoplankton communities. If you don't know what is phytoplankton, these are very small organisms, any kind of organisms in water body that will be drifted by water currents. So they don't have active swimming capacity. So fish was present, and then fish was not absent, but much lesser population. And what we see, strong, pronounced effects that are observable in the phytoplankton are also zooplankton and so on and so forth. So then we can understand how these changes are affecting ecosystems. But of course, there is one problem. That's a single individual ecosystem. And how do we know if it will be the same pattern in another lake? That was one of the big criticisms on ecology for many years. You know, it's of course a major science. However, still people can criticize as if it is, you know, this, collector's effort, or naturalist effort. So there is no formal hypothesis testing in it. That can be valid criticism, but there are also other methods that we can employ, which are called experimental ecology. In this one, for example, that is a picture from my master thesis that we conducted in Lake Düden in İğirdir. We were interested at that time to understand how the nutrient inputs to the lake affects the pelagic producers like phytoplankton, and then the benthic producers like macroplants or macroalgae. So those ones is kind of competing with each other, because you know, if plankton is much more than normal, then they can shade the bottom, and then the plants will not get enough light. And if the plants are really doing well, then they can limit the nutrient transport to the water column, and then limit the phytoplankton, so on and so forth. There are lots of complex dynamics going on. And instead of those, there is also the fish and zooplankton, phytoplankton, they are all interacting. How we can understand what is going on? We call these things mesocosms. I will come to that to the end. That's an in situ mesocosm. That is something we constructed in the ecosystem, in a lake. What we do, we put these nylon bags. They are big nylon bags, 1.5 meters wide, and then we stick them to the depths of the sediment. So we basically isolate a portion of the lake with all of its components. Then we can manipulate the conditions according to our hypothesis. And then we can also do it in a replicated design. This is also very important. And then we can run it for 2-3 months, and then we can get more robust patterns about our hypothesis. In this one, what we were most interested is the resilience of the macrophytes, although there is turbidity, and also the effect on the periphyte, the algae that's growing on the plants. So we found some very interesting results. I'm not going to detail on those because we have lots of things to talk, but if you're interested, I try to leave the references on the bottom of the slides, and I suppose it will be on YouTube. So if you're interested, you can click on this and read much more. Today, I will be talking about the Anatolian Lakes under extinction crisis. Our landscape is right now under immense pressure, complex pressures. And we will be talking those, and I'm not the only one. There are lots of people involving in these projects, and these are the 3 leading researchers in the project: Eric, Meryem, and Zuhal from METÜ, and myself. And we try to conduct a 3-year study on understanding dynamics happening in these Anatolian lakes. So something is changing, but change was always there. You know, I'm talking to graduate students at AYBE, so I can imagine that you know much more than I do about the geological past, but the world was always changing, also for biota, not only for geology. And for the last 35 million years, you know, the world is cooling. It was quite a warm place back then, and the parrots were flying in the Siberian landmass. But then we start to cool for some reasons that are not relevant, but they are natural reasons. And then we also have the ice ages. So ice ages are very important, and I can imagine Emrah knows also more than I do about the refugee effect. They also study lots of genetics about it. So the Anatolia is important because majority of the Europe was ice covered. The mid parts of the Europe was mostly quite a harsh climate, but then the Mediterranean basin and significantly Anatolia became a habitat for species that they can run away from the ice. And we can see these signatures if we look at the patterns in species. For example, these colors represent some metrics about freshwater fish species. If you check the green map, Turkey is very dark color, which means we have a lot of fish species. present in Anatolia. This is a kind of signature of this glacial cycles refugee effect. Fish can survive in Anatolia, and they can probably rehabilitate all these European landmass when the Ice Age ends. So we have a very specific diversity. The numbers are not relevant. Every year new species are designated, but sometimes they are redesignated and so on and so forth. But the important thing is that we have a huge fish diversity, almost comparable to Russia. And imagine Russia. Russia is so big. But in the red map, that is the risk of extinction in a way. This is the ratio of the threatened species. Again, Turkey is very bright. Unfortunately, the majority of our fish diversity is under threat. This is one thing. And we know that this is human-induced. As I told you, the world was cooling, but it was for natural reasons. But since last century, the world is warming back again. And this is definitely not natural, because we know from the modeling studies, we can model the past climate for 2 centuries, and it fits very well until the carbon dioxide emissions. And what we see that's a pretty big support that this current change can be explained by the human effect, including the carbon dioxide emissions. I'm just going fast, but if you need to discuss anything, because I think right now, the Glasgow meeting was in the news, so I feel that it might be redundant information. That's why I'm trying to be fast. But if you need any extra time, please do interfere and we can discuss if it is really valid observation. But anyways, the scientific community is well matured right now. We are all convinced that this climate change is human-induced. And it is to the extreme in terms of time and space. And species will have a lot of trouble to adapt to it. And one important aspect of this about water, because the world is not only getting warm, especially for some regions, especially here in the Mediterranean region, the brownish places you see on this map is expected to dry out. So there will be lots of water scarcity in these regions, up to 50% decline. So you can, we are living in the Mediterranean region. We know that the water is already scarce. And if you lose 50% more, it will be really, really dry. And that will have consequences. And that's also the same for droughts. Drought is it's not only the meteorological drought, but also you should imagine that there will be a water use increase. But anyways, we expect that the drought in our region will skyrocket in the years to come. And this will have some consequences for our lakes. To be able to understand these things, last year we were working on those, especially in the Konya Close Basin. That's an important basin where all the water is flowing inwards. So the water is inside in this area, in this patch. We call it a basin. I suppose you're all familiar with this. Anyways, Konya Close Basin is a big basin that represents this Anatolian drylands. Of course, it was not always like that. 10,000 years ago, there was a big paleo lake in Konya, this gray patch. It decreased and then it left some notable marshes behind, Otomuş marshes, Eğirdir marshes, and lots of other lakes. And all this area is mostly karst. It means sponge-like geology. So all the groundwater is connected in one way or the other. And that's important because this also supplies the groundwater is supplying the surface water. And what is happening? We use some remote sensing work led by Zuhal. And what you see is, for example, for Lake Düden, there's a special lake also for me because I have been doing bird watching in this lake since early 2000s. So I know that's a fantastic place with thousands of flamingos. And in the summertime, when you go there, you will see these pink flamingos flying all around over this pink lake. I must say the same sentence now in past tense because the lake has disappeared this year. And we can trace it in the remote sensing since 1985. And you can see the change in the lake. It gets smaller, smaller, and smaller, and this year it disappeared. And you can see that this water loss is significant in both wet season and dry season. So that's a very dramatic effect. The same thing happened much earlier for Lake Meke. That was one of the iconic lakes of Turkey. It was on almost all tourism information billboards. That was a fantastic volcanic lake. It's like a ring around this volcanic caldera. And what happened is, you can trace it here. It gradually faded into darkness. This is the water that is sensed by the satellites, and that is designated with some algorithms, with some clever algorithms, and we can see the pattern. After 2005, we lost the lake. That is bad, indeed very bad. And that is the final picture of it. So it doesn't look really beautiful. And we took this picture in June 2020 during our expedition. Yes, and while I was preparing this presentation, I tried to take a Google image for Düden Lake, this cool lake, and just a kind of divine intervention, I would say. You know, this in Google Earth images that are composite images, because there are sometimes clouds, so they compile several images from several years. And by some chance, these composite image borders cuts through this lake. So on the left-hand side, this is an old image that you can see Lake Kulu with all its waters. Not the full extent, but a good amount of water. The right-hand side image is a recent one that you see only the dry lake bed. This lake was a home for tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of birds for breeding, and definitely during the migration much more. And significant breeding location for flamingos. And now we lost this lake. And this is not only the extinction problem. I mean, we are losing our natural lakes in big numbers, but we are also changing their functioning and composition. We can also, of course, we don't have data. So we don't have, you know, I showed you a picture previously at the beginning of the slide from Denmark, where you have bi-weekly monitoring of lakes for 20 years. We don't have this. So we have no idea what happens. But we can use this remote sensing images again, and there are some clever algorithms that can potentially predict the salinity. And what we see in these lakes, we see a significant change in the salinity index. If it is lower, it is more saline. So the lakes are also getting more saline. And you know, pH, salinity, these kind of chemical properties are driving properties that can affect any kind of ecosystem property. And what is the reason among these changes? That's what we can do so far. And what is the reason behind these changes? It is this groundwater use. We are losing the groundwater, and it's extreme. In the last 50 years, it is 70 meters drop in some of the groundwater wells, majority of the groundwater. All of them are experiencing drops from 10 meters to 70 meters. However, it's to the extreme because, you know, I mean, this is a karst area. So all the groundwater is connected. So it is not just isolated pocket of water that we lose. We lose the entire water level in this big catchment. And the consequences are, of course, not good. And this is the reason for this. These are the wells that are not regulated as illegal wells. Check the abundance of it. This is from a report from WWF. So other than our regular uncontrolled groundwater use, that is the illegal one. And imagine the legal one. So we basically let it loose in Konya closed basin. And, you know, we have the temporal patterns. We know things went bad since 2000s. It was always, you know, a decline, but it became dramatic during 2000. So what happened? And here are some statistical results from the agricultural activities in this catchment. What you see here is changes in the colors. Again, they represent the pattern in time. And what you see simply an increase in the red and yellow bars through time. Red and yellow represents maize and sugar beet. These are mısır and şeker pancar. These are extremely water thirsty crops. So although our ecosystem is declining, the Konya closed basin is just giving flags of it's in difficult condition. In the last 20 years, we increased the production of water thirsty crops. And the result is a significant and sharp increase in the irrigation demand that we meet with pumping more and more groundwater. That's not sustainable in any case, not even for electricity, because when you drop the groundwater, you need more electricity to pump. And that's an exponential increase. So it's not only twice of the electricity bill, it becomes 4 times the electricity bill. So it's more energy needed to take this water up. So this is the reason behind this dramatic decline. So what happened in this catchment? That's a dry land, arid land that needs to be well taken care of, needs well-managed agriculture and lots of animal husbandry, but we converted it to this green fields as if it is a high water area. And the result is this extreme loss of habitats. And that's a paper from Tuba and Meryem from previous years, and they showed elegantly a very dramatic warning. Lake Beyşehir is the biggest freshwater lake in Turkey, and they did some modeling with the current data. Now, what they have seen in all model scenarios, we are losing Lake Beyşehir. I mean, this is the biggest freshwater lake in Turkey, and we can even lose it. It is just nearby Konya Closed Basin. So that is a dramatic warning that we need to take action very, very soon. And the future is here. Now, I frequently travel across Anatolia and I always take pictures, and this is almost unbiased pictures of our aquatic ecosystems. These are riverbeds across Taurus Mountains. Wherever you travel, you see rivers that are bone dry. So the future has already arrived. So it is not some distant future that we expect this extreme loss. And it is happening everywhere. I mean, these are previous lakes. Just this is the southern end of Konya Closed Basin, and these mountains are the Taurus Mountains, and that was a previous lake. Now it is dead, and the responsible killer is just, you see in the patterns, all the agriculture that is cut free in the surrounding catchment. In some of the lakes, in a very few lakes, you can find water. But does it look like a lake, a natural lake? I mean, it almost likes a picture from a Star Wars movie or something like that, isn't it? I mean, everything is geometrically shaped very well, as if it's some futuristic movie. It is Sula Depolama Alanı. It's a famous location. So we are bringing water from Göksu, another catchment, to fill this place, to feed the agriculture again. So this is, I mean, the remaining water is right now trapped in dams. So almost no water is left for natural ecosystems. And of course, there are ecosystem consequences of those. We can also document those. We have loss of habitat, we have degradation of ecosystems, and then, of course, the change in the ecosystem characteristics like salinization. And this will definitely have changes in the biota and the ecosystem services. One example is from birds. Kaan did a very good job to analyze those with us. What we see, for example, these are important globally threatened birds: common pochard, marble teal, and white-headed duck. These are beautiful organisms, beautiful birds. I have the privilege to see most of them, and I don't have the privilege to see the marble teal in Turkey. And I think I will never have the chance, at least in the near future, because it went extinct in Turkey. The remaining ones are still available, but they are declining. And you can see in this nice colorful graph, the colors are fading through time. Previously in this catchment, we have a healthy breeding population of white-headed ducks, marble teal, and common pochard. Marblefield and went extinct, also went extinct in Göksu Delta, and went extinct probably in East Anatolia, so it's went extinct from Turkey, most likely. The remaining ones are becoming very few. And in ecology, community ecology, we call it extinction depth. Yes, they are not extinct yet, but it's definitely a bill that we are going to pay in near future because they are in the track of extinction. And this is not good, not cool at all. We can easily see the consequences of this in Anatolia. And when we do some more community ecology analysis, for example, this is about richness patterns, and you can see that the darker the blue looks beautiful to the eye, but it means more dramatic decline. And we see between 10% to 50% decrease in breeding bird communities in 20 years duration between 1998 and 2018. We are very lucky because in this area there were 2 breeding bird atlases. Some people go out and count the number of birds that are during the breeding period. And when we compare that, there's a dramatic decline. So the overall richness declined from 62 species to 48 species. So that is very dramatic. And we lost several species from this region. And overall, I mean, that's this blue everywhere. So we are experiencing decline up to 50% in the entire basin. In community ecology, we like diversity. So beta diversity is a kind of, we call species turnover. So how different the squares are from each other in terms of their bird composition. It's something good in general, but it's context dependent. Because here we have an increase in beta diversity. However, not because that we have different habitats or organisms, because we have this subtractive loss of organisms, subtractive heterogenization, because we are losing species more in some squares than the others. So it's not a positive thing in this context. Another important thing is, yes, there is still some water is available, but then it's temporal duration when it is available during the breeding season. And it is less available during the breeding season. They are drying faster than normal in this arid landscape now compared to the previous years. And that can easily have consequences for the birds. So it means more dramatic decline during the breeding periods. In the winter, there could be some water, very good for wintering and migrating birds. But for breeding birds, they need the water in the habitat during the breeding periods. That is in the early spring and early summer between. So that is even more dramatic for them. And that will also have consequences for different bird species, because we have diving ducks, dappling ducks, they use different depths of water. And when we lose water faster, it means more difficult conditions for birds that require deeper water. And we also see signatures of those. And we also, Korhan also did nice analysis about other patterns of their functions of these bird communities. And the diving birds are decreasing more than the overall patterns. The body mass of average bird is decreasing in this catchment. Specific breeding birds with specific breeding habitat requirements, they are decreasing more. And interestingly, the brain mass tend to increase on average. So probably, of course, that is just a speculation, but it will be a nice speculation saying that because of all this extinction pressure, the clever birds can survive. But of course, that this is very limited data. We are very lucky that we have this data with great effort for many people, including Kerem from Istanbul, Kerem Ayboyla, who run the latest breeding bird atlas nationwide, but also many other people from Doğa Derneği, WWF, who conducted previous atlases. So we are really grateful to their efforts. So we have at least some data. Same picture for the fish, but fish is a bit more special. As I told you, this is the refugium. The Anatolia is the refugium for the Eurasian fish species. And KCV, Konya Close, is extra special because 70%, 75% of the species are endemic. So that's an immense endemism ratio. And 60% of those are threatened. So we are losing our endemic species. So this is very, very big crisis. And this is not only the, by the way, this is, in this age, it is multiple stresses. It is not only the water loss. For example, there's a nearby lake, Lake Eğirdir, in another catchment. And previously in the 1950s, the government and the scientists released a fish from another biogeography to the lake, hoping that it will be providing better fish meal. What happened is, we know after that, of course we cannot blame them, that was the spirit of these 1950s. People were releasing organisms from one place to the other. However, later we learned better, and we learned that that's not a good idea. And what happened in Lake Eğirdir, 2 fish species went extinct immediately, and they were both endemic. And now they are lost from the entire world. We don't have these species anymore. And it ended up being a sad story, because after the local fish stocks have crashed, this Pikeperch is never become a sustainable source of fisheries. So it was a failure on all fronts. So it's just to remind ourselves, it is not only water loss or habitat quality change, but also multiple stresses coming from very different angles. So overall, I'm sad. I mean, sometimes I have some tears in my eyes when I try to work, but that's a very sad natural history story. So we try to understand the patterns of aquatic ecosystems in mid-Anatolia in space and time, and we have some patterns. To be able to get them, we did a 1-month expedition in the entire mid-Anatolia. We use remote sensing technology and statistical modeling to understand the patterns that we can get through time. And then we also did rigorous literature survey, and we can see that there are lots of changes. But that is the limit of observational ecology. That's what we cannot observe more, we cannot go back in time. There are some methods that we can use in paleoecology, but for now we cannot go back in time, let's say that. And these ecosystems are not only a habitat for endangered species. We cannot only quantify the change by means of loss of species, because these ecosystems are an integral part of the global biogeochemical cycles. They do function on many aspects. They contribute to the green gas emissions, they contribute to the oxygen production, carbon dioxide emissions, and so on and so forth, lots of things, starting from those, and lots of other ecosystem services. And how can we understand the effect of these pressures, like water loss or salinization, on the functioning of these ecosystems? And then we can consider the experimental ecology. Because in the observational ecology, you are bound to fixed location in time and space, and you cannot replicate it. However, what we do, we are creating Mesocosm facilities. I'm running this work package to establish 2 Mesocosm facilities in Ankara campus and our Mersin campus. And Mesocosms are basically representative sub-ecosystems, small ecosystems, where we can manipulate conditions under controlled and replicated fashion, like a proper scientific experiment. But of course, then you need a representative ecosystem, so they need to be big tanks with all the biota in. But in general, the structure is 24 tanks. Each of them are 4 cubic meter volume. And this enables us, this 24 tanks, is 3x2 experimental treatment. That's called factorial treatment, full factorial treatment. So 3 salinity levels, 2 temperature levels, for example. And all these treatments can be replicated by 4. So that will give statistical power, representativeness, and a proper hypothesis testing environment. We are still establishing it, but we also started the experiments. The first experiment started this year. So this is the recent status in Mersin campus. This is our experimental tanks. So I just give the picture to give you the full scale of what we do. And these two buildings are the facilities that enable for storage of the sampling equipment or the small field laboratory. And I don't have a recent picture from Ankara, but that was the case in the end of summer. So it's a different design, just the setup, but the same experimental design. Of course, these are not only tanks. Right now, we have the water inlets and so on and so forth, but soon enough, we will have the heaters, so we can simulate climate change in terms of temperature. We will have a data logger and sensors in each tank, so we will know the change in the salt, oxygen, or whatever. And then we also have mixing devices, so we can control lots of aspects in these tanks. And we started our first experiment for 2021, and our first experiment is about the effect of salinization on freshwater lakes of Anatolia. So we inoculated, that's a biological term, so we put the ecosystem in these tanks, in 16 of these tanks, and that are representative of the lakes we are looking for. So that means a lot of work, because we went to this Anatolian Lakes with trucks and excavators, so we get natural sediment, and we need a lot of truckload of sediment. We distributed them to the tanks, because this sediment includes propagules, organisms, the eggs, and the seeds of microphytes, whatever, lots of things. And also this biogeochemical buffer that we need for a representative ecosystem. Lakes are with sediment. And then we also collected among 10 or more lakes, like zooplankton, phytoplankton, and all these organisms, microphytes, fish. And then we put all these things into these tanks with, of course, relevant amounts. And then we have a gradient design, we call it gradient design. We hypothesized 16 different salinity levels, so starting from 0 to 50 ppt. For a scale, 50 ppt is almost twice the salt concentration that we have in the seas. In Mediterranean, it's 38 ppt, so it's 50, much more than the sea, because we have salt lakes also in Anatolia. So what is the experimental design? For the first month after we inoculated the tanks and checked the startup conditions, we started to increase the salinity levels to the targeted level during a month. So that was the increase in salinity, of course, not the same in each tank. And then for the following months, we started to observe the conditions in these ecosystems. That includes lots of things. Just a small set is, for example, we are measuring greenhouse gas dynamics, methane and nitrous oxide. We are looking for metabolism, how oxygen produced, carbon dioxide is produced, and so on and so forth. And also changing biota, phytoplanktons, zooplanktons, microinvertebrates, plus their functions. We are also checking for grazing efficiency and so on and so forth, how they behave. And we plan to run this experiment till the end of February. And hopefully at the end of this, we hope to have a better understanding of the effects of these factors in Anatolian lakes. Of course, next year we will be continuing with more experiments. All right, I'll try to be fast. I hope it was informative, and I hope it was not boring. Many thanks for your kind invitation again. And I would like to thank lots of things. First, funders. We are getting funds from TÜBİTAK with several programs, and also we are grateful for TÜBA, Turkish Academy of Sciences, for support with GEBİ program. And of course, our fantastic group that involves many people, but most significantly Erik Epesen, Meryem Bekdol, and Zuhal Akgürek as the core group, and also lots of students and our fantastic group at METÜ, the Aquatic Ecology group, and also the Bilimleri group at METÜ, and also lots of collaborators that I couldn't name all of them here. Sorry about that. All right.